So I'll send out a Zoom. I'm not going on the street. I'm talking about
It's funny because they even do it
Oh, we're good. Okay. I'll throw hello.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Welcome. I'm realizing as we were singing Hine Matov that that's the sort of mute button before the mute button on Zoom. It's the way we come together and transition from conversation into prayer, of course, and couldn't help but chuckle to myself a little bit about that. It's wonderful to be together, wonderful that we're able to continue to gather in person and to be together on this lovely Shabbat. Just want to sort of situate us a little bit in where we are Jewishly in time right now. So, you know, in the sort of wider sphere of things, we're in the summer. It's warm. It's sunny if we're lucky. And in the Jewish calendar, we're in a bit of a different time than summer often feels like. We're in a very reflective time in particular. That's for two reasons. One is that we have just started the book of Deuteronomy in the Torah, and fundamentally the book of Deuteronomy is a reflecting backwards and a looking forwards kind of book. It's about reflecting on the journey that the Israelites went through in the desert and attempting to sort of bring lessons back from their experience into their new life and their next chapter in the land of Israel. But also we're coming upon very quickly the holiday of Tisha B'Av, the holiday of the 9th of Av, which I'll talk a little bit more about tonight, which starts on Saturday night. And this too is a time of looking back, of mourning, of grieving the loss of the temples in Jerusalem. So this is a very sort of reflective and contemplative time for us as a Jewish community. So that, and I think many of us are sort of wrestling with some uncertainty about COVID. I think some of us have seen the rising case numbers this week and have been a bit sort of concerned, not sure what to make of it, and are just holding a little bit of uncertainty about that as well. So, you know, really all of those things, but whatever it is that you're feeling this Shabbat, I really want to invite you to bring it in, to let that be the kind of ultimate content of your prayer and your song tonight. And to help us really just begin to connect to whatever it is we're feeling this Shabbat, I want to offer a poem called The Guest House by Rumi. This being human is a guest house. Every morning a new arrival. A joy, a depression, a meanness, some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all. Even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house, empty it of its furniture, still, treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. I realize I don't have a siddur. Uh-oh. Thank you. I don't know how that happened. Marianne, thank you so much. So, you prepare and then you don't prepare, So, with all of that in mind, let's begin starting on page 13 or 722 with Shalom Aleichem. Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Asharet, Malachei Elyon, Mi-Melech Malachei Amlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Boachem L'Shalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi-Melech Malachei Hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Baruchuni L'Shalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi-Melech Malachei Hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Tzedchem L'Shalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi-Melech Malachei Hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We'll continue in English on page 14 in our prayer book, and I'll invite Chris up to lead us.
A Sabbath prayer. Dear God, help us now to make this a new Shabbat. After noise, we seek quiet. After crowds of indifferent strangers, we seek to touch those we love. After concentration on work and responsibility, we seek freedom to meditate, to listen to our inward selves. We open our eyes to the hidden beauties and the infinite possibilities in the world you are creating. We break open the gates of the reservoirs of goodness and kindness in ourselves and in others. We reach toward one holy, perfect moment of Shabbat.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, so this brings us to our Psalms of Kabbalat Shabbat, starting with Lechu Neranena on page 15 or page 254. Lechu Neranena, Lechu Neranena, Lechu, Lechu Neranena, Ladonai. Lechu Neranena, Lechu Neranena, Lechu, Lechu Neranena, Ladonai. Naria, Naria, Letzur Yishenu, Nekadma Fana Betoda. Naria, Naria, Letzur Yishenu, Bizmirot Naria Lo. Lechu Neranena, Lechu Neranena, Lechu, Lechu Neranena, 256 with Yismechu. Yismechu hashamayim. Yismechu hashamayim. Yismechu hashamayim. V'tagel haaretz. Yismechu hashamayim. Yismechu hashamayim. Yismechu hashamayim. V'tagel haaretz. Yiram hayam. Yiram hayam. Yiram hayam. Umalo. Yiram hayam. Yiram hayam. Yiram hayam. Umalo. Yismechu hashamayim. Yismechu hashamayim. Yismechu hashamayim. V'tagel haaretz. We'll continue with page 17 or 256 with Or Zarua. Or Zarua la tzadik, ule yishrei lev simcha. Or Zarua la tzadik, ule yishrei lev simcha. Simchu tzadikim b'Adonai, v'hodu lezecher kodsho. Simchu tzadikim b'Adonai, v'hodu lezecher kodsho. Or Zarua la tzadik, ule yishrei lev simcha. Or Zarua la tzadik, ule yishrei lev simcha. We'll continue with Romamu on page 19 or 258. Romamu Adonai Eloheinu v'hishtachavu lehar kodsho. Romamu Adonai Eloheinu v'hishtachavu lehar kodsho. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu Romamu. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu Romamu. Romamu Adonai Eloheinu v'hishtachavu lehar kodsho. Romamu Adonai Eloheinu v'hishtachavu lehar kodsho. I invite everybody to rise in body or in spirit for Mizmor LeDavid on page 20 or page 260. This is a very interesting psalm, and you may have noticed, for those of you who have come a few times to Friday night services, it's a psalm that I do like to talk about. It is sort of fundamentally interested in the question of how does God show up on earth? How do we feel God's presence in our reality and in our life? And according to this psalm, the biggest sort of way that we feel God's presence on earth as a force of order, a force of grounding amidst the chaos of the universe and the world. They talk about sort of God's voice, Kol Adonai, as this force, as this sort of steadiness amidst the chaos that we feel in the world. So when it says things like Kol Adonai al Hamayim, what this psalm is talking about is the aspect of God that offers us solace, that offers us grounding amidst what is sometimes a reality of storm, a reality of flood. So Shabbat is really our time to experience this aspect of God, this grounding aspect of God. So I invite all of us, really, as we sing this psalm together, to really pray for this connection and to pray for connection to this grounding aspect of God. Mizmor LeDavid, Havu Ladonai B'nei Elim, Havu Ladonai Kavod Va'oz, Havu Ladonai Kavod Shemo, Yishtachavu Ladonai Behadra Kodesh, Kol Adonai al Hamayim El HaKavod Hirim, Adonai al Mayim Rabim, Kol Adonai B'koach, Kol Adonai Behadar, Kol Adonai Shover Arazim, Vayashaber Adonai et Arze Halvanon, Vayarkidem Kemo Egel Levanon Vesirion, Kemo Ben Remim, Kol Adonai Hotzev Lavot Esh, Kol Adonai Yachil Midbar, Yachil Adonai Midbar Kadesh, Kol Adonai Yecholel Ayalot, Vayechesov Ye'arod, Uvehechalo Kulo Omer Kavod, Kulo Omer Kavod, Adonai Lama Buyashav, Vayeshev Adonai Melech Leolam, Adonai Oz Le'amo Yitain, Adonai Yevarech et Amo V'Shalom. You may be seated. We'll continue now with the prayer for deliverance, which we find on the bottom of page 20. Think together, let's read it together in English today. God, whose mighty hand makes nations free, release all captives, hear our humble plea. Accept this plaintive song we offer you to praise and glorify your name. Preserve the righteous ones who seek you, who in love sing out your oneness. Guard and bless with your greatness your people who revere your name. You are God who are alone exalted. Turn to us. Hearken to our prayer. Our thoughts revealed, laid bare before you, as your dominion ever we proclaim. All right, so this brings us to Lecha Dodi on page 21 or 262. Lecha Dodi likrat kala penei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala penei Shabbat nekabela. Shamor vezachor bedibur echad hishmianu el hameyuchad Adonai echad u'shemo echad l'shem u'tiferet ve'elitila. Lecha Dodi likrat kala penei Shabbat nekabela. Likrat Shabbat lechu v'nelcha ki mekor haberacha merosh mikedem nesucha sof ma'aseh b'machshavat chila. Lecha Dodi likrat kala penei Shabbat nekabela. Mikdash melech ir melucha kumitzei mitoch ha'hafecha rav lach shevet be'emek habacha vehu yachamol alaychem la. Lecha Dodi likrat kala penei Shabbat nekabela. Invite everyone to rise in body or in spirit for the final paragraph of Lecha Dodi on the next page. Boi v'shalom ateret bala gam besimcha uve this brings us to our psalm for Shabbat, which we find on page 23 or page 266. Mizmor shir leyom haShabbat, tov lehodot l'Adonai, ulezamer l'shimcha elyon, ulezamer l'shimcha elyon, lehagid baboker chasdecha, ve'emunatecha balelot, alei asur, va'alei navel, alei higayon ve'chinor, mizmor shir leyom haShabbat, tov lehodot l'Adonai, ulezamer l'shimcha elyon, ulezamer l'shimcha elyon. And we'll continue responsively in English. And David, come on up and lead us, please.
Thank you. A song for Shabbat. It is good to acclaim Adonai, to sing your praise, exalted God.
To affirm your love each morning and your faithfulness each night to the music of the lute and the melody of the harp.
Your works, Adonai, make me glad. I sing with joy of your creation.
How vast your works, Adonai! Your designs are beyond our grasp.
The thoughtless cannot comprehend. The foolish cannot fathom this.
The wicked may flourish, springing up like grass, but their doom is sealed, for you are supreme forever.
Your enemies, Adonai, your enemies shall perish. All the wicked shall crumble.
But me you have greatly exalted. I am anointed with fragrant oil. I have seen the downfall of my foes. I have heard the despair of my attackers.
The righteous shall flourish like the palm tree. They shall grow tall like a cedar in Lebanon, planted in the house of Adonai. They will thrive in the courts of our God.
They shall bear fruit even in old age. They shall be ever fresh and fragrant, to proclaim Adonai is just, my rock in whom there is no flaw. Yasher Koach. Thank you, David. We will close this psalm with starting at the 4 lines from the bottom and the words Tzadik Katamar. Tzadik Katamar Yifra Ke'erez Balvanon Yizgeh Shetulim Beveit Adonai Bechatzrot Eloheinu Yafrichu Od Yenuvun Beseva Deshenim Verananim Yiyu Lehagid Ki Yashar Adonai Turi Velo Avlatabo. This brings us to the first mourner's Kaddish of our service, which we find on page 24 or page 268. I'll invite you to rise in body or in spirit if you're in mourning or commemorating a yortzeit this Shabbat. Yitkadal ve'yitkadash shemei Rabbah ve'alma divra kiruteh ve'amlich malchuteh ve'chayechon v'yomechon u'chayeh dechol beit Yisrael bagala uvizman kari ve'imru amen yehei shmei Rabbah mevorach le'olam u'amei omaya yitbarach ve'yishtabach ve'yitpa'ar ve'yitramam ve'yitnaseh v'tadar v'talev v'talal shmei dekudsha b'richu le'ela mikol birchata v'shirata tush b'chata v'nechemata damiran be'alma ve'imru amen yehei shlama Rabbah min shemaya v'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imru amen oseh shalom b'mromav hu yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imru amen. You may be seated. So we sort of hold together sort of ancestors and descendants in this moment. Something I love about the way we do it here, that we now take a moment to bless the children in our community, in our lives. And we find that blessing on page 311 or 722. When we do this, just I want to invite you to think about, the children in your life, the children of this community, but of course the children that are particularly special to you. We're on 311 or 722. Yesimech Elohim ke'Ephraim v'chi Menashe, Yesimech Elohim ke'Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, v'Leah. May God grant you the blessings of Ephraim and Menashe, of Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah. Yevarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha. May Adonai bless you and guard you. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'yechuneka. May Adonai show you favor and be gracious to you. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. May Adonai show you kindness and grant you peace. Shabbat Shalom, everybody. I'll just say, leading in a mask, I don't know, for whatever reason today is feeling like a little harder, so forgive me if I'm a little quieter. It's hard. Who knew that this is what we would be doing in our lives? In any event. This Saturday night begins the holiday of Tisha B'Av, or the 9th of Av. It is the day that we set apart in the Jewish year to mourn the destruction of the temples in Jerusalem, as well as the incredible loss of life that accompanied this destruction. Now, because we are so far from this time, it happened almost 2,000 years ago, it can be hard for us to understand how devastating the destruction and loss truly was. Over 1 million Jews died during this time period. Many were killed, and many died from starvation or from fire. Many Jews were also sold into slavery. On top of this was the religious crisis that the destruction of the temple created. For the Jews of the time, it seemed as though Judaism, as they knew it, was shattered beyond repair. The temple, which was the symbol of the covenant between God and the Jewish people, was no more. What did this mean for the relationship between God and the people of Israel? Were the people of Israel now on their own? In addition, the religious life that they practiced was entirely gone. The version of Judaism that they practiced took place in the temple, required the temple. Sacrificial offerings, which were at the center of their religious life, could only happen at the temple. Holiday celebrations could only happen at the temple. So not only did the people of Israel lose so many in their community, but they lost themselves. They lost their sense of what it means and looks like to be Jewish. They lost their sense of what their future would hold as Jews. The losses were devastating. In response to how monumental this moment was for the Jewish community, the rabbis of the Talmud spill much ink attempting to explain why the catastrophe happened. This reaction to crisis makes a lot of sense. Of course, they would want to understand why and how this could have happened. The most often cited explanation is that the temple was destroyed because of sinat chinam, as a punishment from God for baseless hatred among the people of Israel. But many other explanations are given. The people worshipped idols, they didn't keep Shabbat, the people didn't say the Shema, young people were not studying Torah, people were not trustworthy, and it goes on. Now, although I am deeply sympathetic to why the rabbis wanted to try and explain why this tragedy happened, I find this approach difficult to reconcile. This is in part because the rabbis' explanations are rooted in a theology and a belief about God that I do not share. The theology underlying their explanations is that what happened to the Jews was a punishment for their behavior and lack of faith. They brought destruction upon themselves. Now, while this may have been a coherent theology in their time, many of us today experience the world differently. Particularly when it comes to suffering on a grand scale, we struggle to reconcile why people who are mostly good suffer for no good reason. Suffering is more mysterious than it is explicable. But there is another reason that I struggle to relate to this approach to tragedy. Attempting to explain why a tragedy happened is about control, where control is not possible. Underlying the rabbi's attempts to explain the temple's destruction is this: if we can just figure out why the destruction of our temple and our community happened, then maybe we can prevent such tragedies from happening again in the future. This is perfectly understandable as a reaction, and it is a reaction many of us have to loss. When we experience the pain of loss, we want to avoid it, we want to try to fix it, and we want to do everything we can to ensure that it doesn't happen again. But unfortunately, this is not the nature of loss. If we have learned anything this past year and a half, it is that loss is a part of our lives, as individuals, as a Jewish people, and as a world. No matter how much we would like to avoid it, pain and loss is part of what it means to be alive. Given this, I want to offer us a different spiritual question, one also offered by the rabbis of the post-temple era, with which to approach our personal and communal experiences of pain and loss. This is a question of how rather than of why. In the words of Rabbi Richard Hirsch, the key to understanding Jewish history is in studying the ways of how. How following disaster after disaster, the Jewish people found the courage to start anew, to recommit to Torah, and to reaffirm that life had or at least could have meaning, notwithstanding the evil that was so often manifest. The question that Tisha B'Av invites us to ask, as a Jewish people, as individuals, as a world, is how in the face of pain and loss do we find the strength to recover and start again? How we recommit to what we most value, how we find meaning in life in the face of tragedy. This year and a half has been a year of pain and immense loss. In light of it, we're invited not to explain, but to walk the path of how, to discern how we move forward, how we remain committed to our most prized values, and how we find meaning in our lives. This Tisha B'Av, as we grieve the tragedies of our Jewish past and our global present, may we find ourselves strengthened for the creative and meaningful work ahead. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. So I'll invite everybody to rise in body or in spirit. We are beginning Mariv with the Baruchu, our prayer for presence. We're on page 28 or 279. Baruchu et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai Mevorach Leolam Va'ed. You may be seated. I'll invite Marcia up to lead us in English in the English paragraph just below.
Praised are you, Adonai our God, who rules the universe, your word bringing the evening dusk. You open with wisdom the gates of dawn, design the day with wondrous skill, set out the succession of seasons, and arrange the stars in the sky according to your will. Adonai Tzebaot, you create day and night, rolling light away from darkness and darkness away from light. Eternal God, your sovereignty shall forever embrace us. Praised are you, Adonai, for each evening's dusk.
Umavir yom umevi laila, umavdil ben yom uvein laila, Adonai Tzevaot Shemo, El Chai v'Kayam, Tamid yimlach aleinu otanu leolam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai hamari varavim. Thank you, Marcia, by the way, for leading us in English just a moment ago. We'll continue with Ahavat Olam on page 29 or 282. Ahavat Olam, Beit Yisrael, Amcha Ahavta, Amcha Ahavta, Torah u'mitzvot, Chukim u'mishpatim, Otanu limadeta, Otanu limadeta, Al ken Adonai Eloheinu b'shofbenu, Kumenu nasiach b'chukecha, V'nismach b'divrei Toratecha, U'mitzvotecha le'olam va'ed, Ki hem chayenu, ve'orech yameinu, U'vahem negei yomam v'layla, negei yomam v'layla, Ve'ahavatecha al tasir mimenu le'olamim, Baruch atah Adonai Ohev Amo Yisrael, Ohev Amo Yisrael. Sort of struck by these words. This is a time of year where most often the images of God we receive are rather punishing. That's sort of the story of the temple's destruction. Yet each day we also affirm an entirely different aspect of God, the God who Ohev Amo Yisrael, who simultaneously loves the people of Israel and all people. We do our best to hold these images together. That's the work of life, to live in those two ways of being. Just wanted to offer that. So this brings us into the Shema and the V'ahavta, speaking of loving images of God and images of love. We find that on page 30 or 284. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol me'adecha, ve'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi metzavecha hayom al levavecha, ve'shinantam levanecha ve'dibarta bam be'shivtecha beveitecha u'vlechtecha v'derech u'v'shachbecha u'v'kumecha u'kshartam leot al yadecha ve'hayu letotafot b'neinecha u'ktavtam al mezuzot beitecha u'b'sharecha. We'll continue with the next two paragraphs of the Shema individually. continue in English on page 32 or 290. And I'll invite Anita up to lead us.
Yes.
Yeah.
Daily you renew our souls, restoring us as you redeemed our ancient nation Israel. From slavery to freedom, from sorrow to triumph, blessing our people with the springtime of its life, to be renewed by all of us each year. Healer of our wounds, holy God, do not abandon us, threaten to tyrants who deny your sovereignty. Into your care we commit our souls, now as in the past, sustained by your truth, embraced by your love, inspired with hope for the future by your faith in us. Beloved are you, Redeemer of the people Israel, whose faithfulness in ages past assures our future too. Thank you. We'll continue on the same page in Hebrew, starting at the box in the word umalchuto. Umalchuto beratzon kiblu alehem Moshe v'nei Yisrael echanu shira besimcha rabba ve'amru chulam mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai mi kamocha nedar b'kodesh Nora tehilot osef ele malchutecha ra'u v'necha boker yam lifnei Moshe ze'eli anu ve'amru Adonai imloch le'olam va'ed v'ne'emar kifada Adonai et Yaakov uge'alo miyad chazak mimenu baruch ata Adonai Gal Yisrael. We continue in English on page 33 or 293. Marianne, I believe? Yes. Yes. Yes, thank you so much.
Top part, right?
Yes.
Yes. Help us, Adonai, to lie down in peace and awaken us again, our sovereign, to life. Spread over us your shelter of peace. Guide us with your good counsel. Save us because of your mercy. Shield us from enemies and pestilence, from starvation, sword, and sorrow. Remove the evil forces that surround us. Shelter us in the shadow of your wings, O God, who watches over us and delivers us, our gracious and merciful ruler. Guard our coming and our going. Grant us life and peace now and always. Spread over us the shelter of your peace. Praised are you, Adonai, who spreads the shelter of peace over us, over all his people Israel, and over Jerusalem.
Ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha baruch ata Adonai haporei sukat shalom aleinu ve'al kol amo Yisrael ve'al Yerushalayim. We invite everyone to rise in body or in spirit for the Vishamru on page 34 or 294. Vishamru b'nei Yisrael La'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorot ha-merit olam v'shameru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat La'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorot ha-merit olam B'nei uvein b'nei Yisrael oti le'olam oti Shameru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat La'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorot ha-merit olam Ki sheshet yamim asa Adonai asa vayinafesh v'shameru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam. Yitgadal ve'yitkadash shemei Rabbah ve'alma divra kirute ve'amlich malchute ve'chayechon u'vyamechon u'chayedecho beit Yisrael bagala u'bizman kariv ve'imeru amen Yehei shmei Rabbah mevarach le'alam le'almaya yitbarach ve'yishtabach v'yitba'ar v'yitramam ve'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shmei dekudesha berichu leila min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata tamiran ve'alma ve'imeru amen. So we'll continue now with the silent Amidah, which we will do individually. We find that on page 35b or on the back cover of your Siddur. Now, as usual, I invite you to pray using the words on the page or to pray using the words on your heart this Shabbat. We will meet again on page 38 or 312. So this Shabbat, one of the names for this Shabbat also is Shabbat Chazon. This comes from the Haftorah that we read on Tisha B'Av from Isaiah. And it describes this vision of the people of Israel reconnecting to God and a reality of peace after so much destruction. So as we sort of close this section of our service with Oseh Shalom, I didn't mention that Chazon means vision, Shabbat of vision. So this is the question that I want to invite you to sort of think about as we're doing Oseh Shalom, which is what's your vision of Shalom? What is the vision of peace that sort of animates your thinking? And I really want to invite you to bring that into our song of Oseh Shalom. Maybe I'll even ask some of you after what that vision is. I'll be curious to know. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imru, amen. Ya'aseh shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, Ya'aseh shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imru, amen. All right, so we will continue with our partial repetition of the Amidah on page 47 or 314. I'll invite you to rise in body or in spirit. Vayechulu hashamayim v'haaretz v'chol tzevam, vayechal Elohim bayom hashvi'i melachto asher asa, vayishbot bayom hashvi'i mikol melachto asher asa, vayevarech Elohim et yom hashevi'i, vayekadesh oto, ki bo Shabbat mikol melachto, Shabbat mikol melachto, asher bara Elohim la'asod. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei avoteinu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, v'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Koneh Shamayim va'aretz. You may be seated. Magen Avot bidvaro, mechaye metim b'mamaro, Ha'el Hakadosh she'en kamohu, hameniach le'amo, b'yom Shabbat kodsho, kivam ratza lehaniach lahem, kivam ratza lehaniach lahem, lefanav navod be'yira v'fachad, v'nodeh lishmo b'chol yom tamid, me'ein ha'berachot, el ha'hodaot, Adon ha'shalom, mekadesh ha'shabbat, umparech shevi, umeniach b'kedusha, le'amedu shnei oneg, zecher lema'aseh v'reishit. We will continue in English on the top of page 48 or 315, and I'll invite Ronnie up to lead us.
Our God and God of our ancestors, find favor in our Shabbat rest.
Instill in us the holiness of your mitzvot, and let your Torah be our portion. Fill our lives with your goodness, gladden us with your triumph. Cleanse our hearts so that we might serve you faithfully, lovingly and willingly, Adonai, our God. Grant that we inherit your holy Shabbat, so that the people Israel who hallow your name will always find rest on this day. Praised are you, Adonai, who hallows Shabbat. Thank you, Ronnie. All right, so we will continue with Kaddish Shalem. We are still on 48 or on 316. Yitkadav v'yikadash shemei Rabbah, be'alma divra kirutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, b'gala v'zman kariv v'imeru. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevarach, le'alam u'lam me'omaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach V'yitzrach, v'yitpa'ar, v'yitramam, v'yinaseh, v'yitadar, v'yitaleh, v'yitalal, shmei dekudesha. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tishbechata v'nechemata, damiran be'ama v'imeru. Tizgabal tzladhanu v'adchon, d'chol Yisrael, kodam avuhan divishmaya v'imeru. Yehi shlam arama min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imeru. Oh, say shalom b'mromav, hu yaseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imeru. Amen. All right, I'll invite everyone to rise in body or in spirit for the Aleinu on page 51 or 320. Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, l'tei gedula le'otzer breshit, shelo asanu kegoyim